I think a level of commonality is that your parents had to teach you about some version of hard, some version of human nature that is ugly.
The work's not done, and it's, as you said, it's never done. As we are next leaders and as we become older, it's important to love and care for other people, to have respect for other people, to listen to other people, and to, like you said, pour into other people.
What these guys are saying, they talk to their brothers, they talk to their parents, and you talk to your son about how the world is for you guys.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
As black men, you know, and I think I kind of grew up like not thinking about that, and my dad not explaining things to me really, because there was real thought of it, you know.
So I challenge myself every day to walk in light and in love. And I try to share that as much as I can, because I can't beat hate with hate. I gotta beat hate with love, and I gotta bring in light to eradicate darkness. And it's not easy.
Yeah, I feel like he did a good job of like kind of painting a picture of what like kind of racism issues are today. Like he was using a bunch of different events to like kind of connect it back to why he has to be telling his son this, which obviously like what happens here is a little bit different than like what happens where he's from. So that was like a weird perspective to see, like this is why these conversations need to be had, is because this is going on.
So I'll start off just by really thanking everyone for being part of this. First of all, thank y'all for being there on Monday. I thought it was a great event. I think it's really important for us to really continue these conversations, but also think it's important to continue to hear from folks. And so I think that's what we're going to do today, is we're just going to have a conversation, debrief a little bit. We're a couple of days removed from it, so you've had a chance to kind of allow it to be kind of a reflection. In some ways, hopefully it moved you. If not, I want to hear about all of that. So as we start, if we could, just maybe start on to my left and go around and introduce yourself.
My name is Jeremiah Loon. I'm the men's soccer team. I'm a senior. My hometown is Juba, South Sudan.
Sam Terranova. I'm on the men's soccer team as well. And I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina. And this is my first semester.
Kendall Edwards, also on the men's soccer team. Originally from Decatur, Georgia. I'm a graduate student now, so been here for a bit.
I'm Sydney Daniels. I'm not on the men's soccer team. I'm a Libero DS on the volleyball team, and I'm a freshman, and I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina.
And I'm Dan Bellamy. I'm the Director of Sports Medicine here at NC State. And I'm from Washington, D.C., PG County.
So you had a chance to go to it. There were some expectations maybe that you had before you went to it. We tried to explain as much as we could what the context and the framework was. But based on your expectations, what did you think about the talk?
I thought it was amazing, the fact that one person can play, 24 roles? 24 different roles. I really enjoyed that. How he was quickly able to maneuver his tone and the way he acted to mimic his family members or people that he was talking about. I really enjoyed that a lot. I wanted him to change his clothes, just to
a quick change.
Yeah. Behind scenes.
Yeah, it definitely helped that he was like theatrical and like interacting with the crowd.
Passionate, yeah.
What was powerful for me, obviously, like you said, there's expectations of what we looked at, but getting stories like the Emmett Till story that I feel like everyone's heard and seen, that iconic image, and then other stories like the Khalif Browder or something that I had never even heard about, and just a mixture of that, right? Going from that to speaking about his own life and his own family to then his current situation as a father and dealing with his kid. I think that was really, really powerful for me.
Yeah, it was very relatable. and that was one of my primary feedback to people who asked is these are conversations that I had throughout my young adult, childhood, adulthood, fatherhood. These are conversations that have been a part of I would say the curriculum of my life. So to see it played out on stage there are lots of times where I just kind of laugh because he reminded me of so many people in my life.
Our top story is breaking right now in Baltimore, where rioting has broken out in the streets. Violent clashes between police and roving groups have left several police officers injured and turned one West Baltimore neighborhood into chaos. This violence comes just hours after Freddie Gray, who died under mysterious circumstances last week while in police custody, was laid to rest
Son, we need to talk.
The talk in itself, the framework was him as a black man talking to his son and preparing him what it's like to be out in America. But I think the level of different voices wasn't just about the acting voices. I thought he was giving voices to so many other people in that. He talked about so many different issues. And so can y'all talk a little bit about, maybe some of the other things that he weaved into his talk that went away from him having that conversation with his son?
I think it all kind of played into what he was talking to his son about. I don't think it was him straying off from what he was talking to his son about. I think it was all connected, and this is why, and this is how this is how he has to talk to his son because all this has happened, or his dad talked to him a certain way, or his mom talked to him a certain.
Sure.
In terms of one thing you even mentioned, like perspective, growing up in a Southern family, right? I know he is originally from California, but like the way he spoke with his grandmother or his father, like that was something, like you said, it was like, this is me. This is like all the points, funny, and there's humor to it, right? It's like you feel relatable towards that, even past the conversations about policing or being careful in certain situations, but like just that relatability of who he was, what others might deal with. I know you mentioned how like, oh, that was my grandmother, that was what my father was like, or something like that, or having someone in your family, like my mother, she's from South Carolina. So having, family like that, having this person like that you grew up with, it's so relatable. You're like, yeah, that's real.
I'm reminded of the words of Howard L. Pratt, great poet and playwright out of Durham, North Carolina. He wrote this beautiful piece called Grandma's Letter to Peanut during his freshman year. I was bragging on you to Mrs. Johnson Sunday. My big rusty butt grandson is a freshman in college. I remember when you was playing with Power Rangers. Now look at you, all grown up and smart and handsome. Still, there's some things I want you to keep in mind. I ain't worried about you studying. You always made A's. And your mama and your daddy don't talk to you about drinking and them fast-tailed gals. So I ain't much concerned about that neither. Just remember, that college you go to is mostly white. And you're going to have plenty of white friends. But the world y'all share ain't the same. When you get stopped by the police, you put your hands on the wheel, look straight ahead, don't make no quick movements. You say, yes, sir, and no, sir, and don't ask no questions. You just take the ticket, and we'll deal with it later. And if the lights ever come on behind you at night, you don't stop until you're in a public place. Now, I know you done heard this 100 times. But the time you don't heed it, you'll be headed to Greer's funeral home to make arrangements. My heart couldn't take that, baby.
Yeah, just going based off that, my perspective is a bit different just because I came from another country. But as he was providing those examples, I just found it funny how I was still like how I had those talks with multiple people shortly after I came to the United States, and I was like, wow, like, that's really like, how can I relate to this guy when I've only been in the United States for what, 10 years? Came here in 2011, 11 years now. And I was like, wow, like that's just, like it just hit me,
Wow, yeah. Interesting. That's very interesting.
It's even like issues that even being from South Sudan, like these are issues that. Now I know he didn't mention this, but it's the diaspora, right? It's not just like, oh, this is only like there are issues. I mean, we've got guys on our team from South Africa, obviously with apartheid. That's something that was
Big issue.
big, yeah. And it's like they are thousands of miles away from us. Obviously, Jeremiah can attest to that. But there are issues with type of colorism and things, even with our community, where you're not black enough, you're too black, or whatever situation that you're in. And it's just like, wow, these are still things that we deal with wherever you go.
Yeah, I feel like he did a good job of like kind of painting a picture of what like kind of racism issues are today. Like he was using a bunch of different events to like kind of connect it back to why he has to be telling his son this, which obviously like what happens here is a little bit different than like what happens where he's from. So that was like a weird perspective to see, like this is why these conversations need to be had, is because this is going on.
I like that. He did it. I thought he did an excellent job of framing with the historical events that he shared of why it was so important. There were times when he had emotion, right? He showed some emotion that kind of just shook the crowd, but then he didn't just have this unprovoked emotion. He kind of told a story behind why, the context behind where the emotion came from. Can y'all talk a little bit more about that, because there were some things that just kind of shook you a little bit, and I really want to talk about a couple of those things.
I think the thing that was the same thing that made me kind of chuckle was the same thing that shook me. Right, was the relatability, and even what really got an emotional response from me was seeing pictures of the Baltimore protests and riots. Right, so as an adult. I actually worked at Coppin State, which is in West Baltimore. So it's really in the heart of when all of that was happening. So to see on a screen something that I saw with my own eyes, and to see people comment on it, and to sort of relive that moment in time was just kind of jarring. It was just very jarring to see it like that, to see it played out as a moment in history when it's just a moment in your own life, right? And to tie it into this larger conversation around the brokenness and trauma of these events was truly moving and just impactful.
One of the stories when he was, playing the character of his son was in the store, playing on a little machine, the claw.
Daddy! It took my money! It took my money! It took my money! Stay! Have you lost your mind? All I could think about was the management calling the police on this black kid who's vandalizing their machines.
That can be something that you look at and hear and be like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a little kid. But like, to him, like you're saying, it could have escalated into something where, look at this black boy vandalizing or showing anger or doing this towards. So like you said, there was a reason behind the reaction towards what he felt. Whereas on the surface, right, someone else would be like, okay, this is not what it's going to look like. This is just it. But I feel like that's a perspective that only if you have dealt with it or felt it or feared it, you can think about or even, make that point.
So I'm here to kind of lead the discussion a little bit, but as a black man and as a black father, there are elements that I really want to make sure that I also interject, because you're talking about that, and the situation you talked about was his son being in that arcade and showing all this emotion, and his dad is trying to control his son based on natural emotion that just should happen for a little kid. And so we think about it from the father's perspective. I think about it from the son's perspective, right? Because as a dad, sometimes I got to be careful that my fear doesn't impact how I try to keep my son or my son safe. And so it's a balance. It's a balance as a black man trying to teach his kids the right way to do things, but also teaching them how to be a full human being. And so I don't want to ever be part of the trauma in my kid's life. But if we're not careful, that could happen because we're trying to do the best we can.
I think a lot about my brother. I have a 15-year-old brother, and some of the things which you're saying make me think a lot about it because it's like, how do you explain how do you explain this to someone and explain, like, this is a reason, this is why, this is this, without scaring them or making them feel like, oh, all white people are all these situations happen to you and you only, or you should be afraid or something like that with it. And I think about that because it's just like, you want to keep that innocence almost of like trust and feeling, but also knowing that like there's a reality of things. But you don't want them to learn it through like experiencing it.
I was thinking about my younger brothers as well, and a question popped up in my head. It was like, when is the right time to have this talk? When is the appropriate age to have this talk with your son, your daughter, your younger siblings? Because I had mine with my younger brother when I was 19, and at that time he was 13. Just because like the sport that we play, how we travel, how much we travel, the amount of people that we encounter. I kind of gave him a few of my experiences, and I kind of like spoke to him. Hey, maybe they thought about this because I look this way, or maybe they acted like this because I look this way. And it wasn't necessarily me like trying to scare him or trying to bring trauma to him. It was just me trying to just like keep him awake in a sense.
I think what Sonny tried to do was to speak to a whole lot of different people. His whole mantra was, I'm not having this difficult conversation to call anybody out. I'm really focused on community, how are we bringing each other in? How are we creating a safe space and a courageous space to have real conversations, to see people as who they are as human beings.
What these guys are saying, like they talk to their brothers, they talk to their parents, you talk to your son about how the world is for you guys.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
as black men, you know. And I think I kind of grew up like not thinking about that, and my dad not explaining things to me really because there was no real thought of it, you know.
Your experience is your experience.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
For me, I thought about my brother too. He's 12. So for background, I'm mixed. So I have white, African American, and American Samoan in me. So I lived primarily with my mom, who's white. So I didn't really like have those kind of discussions, and I like grew up in a military family. So we lived on base. So there was people coming in and out from everywhere. So it wasn't like a predominantly white area that I lived in or anything like that. So I never really had that talk. And from what I've seen, my brother didn't either. Like, we live in a pretty like good area. Like, he's never really faced anything like that. He also plays soccer, but I don't know. He just never experienced anything like that. Like, I think my parents wanted to keep him innocent almost. Like, they didn't want to really show him that until he had to face it himself.
Growing up, I lived in a white suburban area, you know, and we had black friends, and we didn't really think anything of it, me and my friends, growing up until around high school when, like, you start seeing those kids that are like, oh, okay, he's an asshole, pretty much. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then you stray away from those kids that could have been your friend when you were 10, 11, and then you realize, oh, we don't have the same views on life.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like my parents would tend to drop like little hints like, oh, that's not right, like what you just saw, like people shouldn't be treated like that, but I was never sat down or talked to in the car about it. It was kind of just like, just letting you know that's not normal.
Same here.
I think despite the sort of the nature of the conversation that we're having, I think a level of commonality is that your parents had to teach you about some version of hard, some version of human nature that is ugly, right? And so my wife is actually, she came from a military family too. So my wife is black. But she never, her experience wasn't mine, right? So she didn't start having these sorts of conversations until we were dating and married, and And then she started to see certain things. It wasn't even really the conversation. It was just observing certain things. So I think that what's good about these conversations is you start to develop sort of empathy because there's so many commonalities, so many common threads, right? Like this was just our version of teaching our kids about how hard human nature and how hard life can be. But you observe that yourself, though it came from a different perspective. And then your parents, in doing a good thing and trying to preserve innocence, pointed out where human beings' behavior strayed away from that. Mm-hmm. But that's not a unique experience. Like that's a shared experience that still it sort of weaves us together. Is that we're brought up in a level of innocence, and gradually life becomes more and more complex. The analogy that I love is that there's a man who's with his daughter on a train, or they're about to board a train, and they have one large suitcase and one small suitcase, and they're rushing. And the analogy sort of goes that, because he loves his daughter, he doesn't want her to try to grab the large suitcase because that's not something she can handle. Like as she gets older, she may be able to handle that. But in the moment, he's going to grab both and then make sure that she's safe, right? And so gradually the luggage becomes heavier as you become an adult, as you get older in your experience. There's some people who carry large suitcases very early, right? Mm-hmm. But as a parent trying to help your kids navigate life, you try to make sure that they get a little at a time and a little at a time and a little at a time. But despite coming from all these different areas, I think a common experience is just life becoming more complex and understanding the sort of very complex nature of human beings is very difficult. And so finding that commonality is really helpful.
Right now, we're talking about some really deep things, and they carry a lot of emotion, and their questions, their viewpoints, and all these different perspectives. But what we saw that night was Sonny broached a very difficult conversation, but he was able to navigate it in a way that really spoke to mostly everyone that was there. It was a mixture, right? It was a very diverse audience, and in so many different regards. Can you talk a little bit about maybe something you learned from that, or that you've seen where these types of conversations have been navigated in a very similar way that was productive?
One thing that shook me and also made me laugh was when he had the conversation with his grandma, who was like white, and he was talking to her, just trying to give her a kind of like a sense of what he's going and how he views life and stuff like that. And what came in my head was a conversation that I had with one of my roommates back at my old school about like 2 years ago. And it was like another thing, just like the talk. And he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna take this serious and try to and look at this from your point of view." And so we went through the event, and right after I asked him, "Hey, so what are your viewpoints? What do you feel about this?" And he just said, like, "I'm just sorry that you have to go through this." He said, "I want to learn more. Can you teach me? Can you show me?" And I was like, "All right, let's have the same exact stuff on, and let's go to this gas station real quick. I'll monitor you and you monitor me." So he dressed up the same way. We went inside. He had on a hood. I was watching him outside, and everything looked all cool, looked all calm. He came out, and I walk inside with my hoodie on. I do the same old, go get, I think I got a drink, a pack of water, went, bought it, walked straight out. He said, "How many times did that guy look at the camera?" For me, he looked at it 3 times. For him, he checked it once. And so I was just, okay. I told him, "Okay, how do you feel about that?" He's like, I don't get why he feels to check the camera 3 times when it's you. When I was wearing the exact same thing, I was looking the exact same way. It's just the difference is our skin colors.
One thing that he said a lot was love. Love each other. And one thing my dad taught me a lot was that you have to love your teammates, because he's a coach. He's a soccer coach as well. And I was around his college soccer team a lot, and you could tell they loved each other, and it didn't matter who they were. and he always like, your teammates are your best friends, so you gotta love them, and I think I carry that with me forever.
Sure.
Love my teammates.
Yeah.
For me, I felt like he started off like talking about Emmett Till kind of, and it reminded me at my old school, first semester, it was kind of like a requirement to go to like a play that was going on, so I went to the Emmett Till one. And when I went with a few of my teammates and a few of my other friends, and we like sat down and they were like, I have no idea who this is. Like, I don't know what this is about. Those pictures were like scary to look at, like those type of things. And it just like, I don't know, it just made me aware. I was like, not everyone is aware, not everyone knows about these past events that happen, these tragedies, these issues. Like, I don't know, it just made me think about that when he started talking about Emmett Till. I was like, wow, like, people need to learn more.
That is something that like frustrates me a lot sometimes, but it's something you have to, because one thing that just kills me inside is like kind of what you're saying, like you may not understand something because you've never gone through it and dealt with it, but what kills me is when people act like it's not there, it's not existent. So even with something like that, I know that's a little bit, but like what your story brought up and what you just brought up, like that's something that's real. And as we even move further from these times, and you know, I always keep bringing my brother, but I always like, as more things happen, you know, talk about having Obama as a president or having people in power, right? You look at all our governors and mayors nowadays and how more diverse it is, they will start to use that as like, see, this isn't a problem because look, these are people in power. But that is an issue that it kills me, because it's just like, as that progresses and as we move further from it, it will always be used as, this is not as true or what you think it is, because look at what happened. Even obviously what happened last week with Tyree Nichols, right? It's just things that are used to be like, well, maybe it wasn't us, maybe it was you, and then you continue on this conversation of blaming the victim and making it, well, it's your issue because even you're dealing with it, or you're not dealing, like you're progressing this way, right? Like diversity hires and things like that, words or terms that I guess should be positive, but can sometimes be used as a negative to make you feel like, oh, I'm only in this position because of, to, you know, check a box.
I feel like it's so hard because you have to experience it to actually fully understand it.
I think they do that because of how heavy the topic is and how like difficult it is to actually have a conversation about it. I'll compare it to like saying like a family member just passed. Of course they'll support you for that, but why isn't that the same thing for this conversation, you know? Kind of like the event that we had on Monday, there was a few people that said, oh, I mean, yeah, I'm just coming just to come, but like I don't really care about it because it doesn't concern me. I haven't went through it, so so there was one person that said that to me, and I said, okay, what if someone in my family passed? Would you care for me then? Sort of kind of, it's like the same sense. It doesn't concern you. It's not your family. But for sure, you would be the first one to say, oh, my condolences. Yeah. Oh, how can I help you? Yeah. You know, all that. Why can't you do the same for me if this is something that relates to me?
I've been doing this probably way too long to admit, and over the last several years, there's been challenge after challenge after challenge when it comes to the issues we're talking about. You know, you talk about Tyree Nichols. Not too long ago was George Floyd. Before that, Ahmaud Arbery, on and on and on. And one of the things in my experience is when you are part of a team. So I played football in college. So it's 100+ folks, right? And we don't all come from the same environment. We don't all have the same, we don't look the same. You know, there's big, small, skinny, wider, black, white, you know, different socioeconomic backgrounds. And there is a special piece. What happens is there's a common goal at some point that's defined. This is what we're about. This is what we're trying to do. And then there's a process in where people really suffer together and they get to know each other and they get to bond, right? And so there's something that starts off where people are different and then they start to find some similar things. And I think that's something special about sport. So when a teammate is hurting, a family member's hurting, then the other family members are hurting. And so I think we've got to start thinking about it in a more global way and not just saying, okay, well, someone that was black was hurting, well, let me go check on the black folks. I think you do, but I think what about everybody? I think about everyone. Everyone deserves that level of love, that comfort, that compassion. But I think our athletes and sport in general have an opportunity to really make a difference when it comes to how are we starting to see each other. Because he talked a lot about how do we see each other. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I know is hard to hate somebody you actually understand. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the challenge is, and Sonny talked about this, at times we get so on this side or this side, right? I've really never met anybody that I agree 100% of the time with. I mean, what's wrong with having a conversation and coming off your viewpoint to try to gain greater understanding? And I think that's kind of what I pulled from what he was saying, is how do we listen in a way to where we listen to try to experience and have a little bit of empathy of what somebody's going through.
I was just going to add, whenever you're talking about like just connecting, especially in the world of sports, I feel like something that the volleyball program is like doing really well. Not only are we like focusing on not just volleyball, we're focusing on health, fitness, mental health, and just connecting with each other like off the court, because we know that'll help on the court as well. We have been talking with a like USA consultant, and she's been helping us with just interacting with each other. And like one of the assignments that she gave us this week was to write an I am poem. So it's basically just kind of explaining who you are using random words. So like it started out with like, I guess, sillier words, and then it would later go into depth about write something that describes your family or a family tradition. And our coach started out by giving his, and we were all like, whoa, like we saw a completely different side of him. So I feel like it'll be really cool to hear each other's, because we'll learn a little bit more about each other and like kind of the background that we come from. I feel like that'll definitely help us as like a team from the sports perspective.
Before you go, let me ask you this. Do you have any final thoughts? Any final thoughts that you want to share? And first of all, we're thankful that you came and joined us today, by the way.
I think the way he has passion about what he was talking about is how we have to think about that sort of issue. Worldwide, we all have to think about this passionately and have thoughts similar. Like you were saying, like we all should think one way, and then maybe we all could relate to one another. Like if we all have a common goal of ending something that is bad in the world, and it's been like this for thousands of years. People have been slaves, people have been discriminated against forever. And I think that if we all shared a common goal of ending that, then it would end. But I mean, it doesn't just happen like that, like, and I think taking steps like the talk help.
Sure. Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
Try my best.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sam.
All right, so I'm going to ask the question then about the talk, right? We're talking about the talk.
Yeah.
Does everyone have an experience of when you received the talk or had to give the talk to someone? You talked about it earlier with your little brother once you started to learn a little bit more about America once you came here, right? What about y'all? Have y'all had a chance to have the talk or receive the talk?
For me, I honestly not really, because the only person I feel that I could give insight to would be my younger brother. And I think in the place that he's at right now, he's not developed enough to quite understand the overall, I guess, concept of it all. Like, it's a big discussion for him to have, so I think he needs to focus on what he's doing right now, and I'll let my parents keep dropping, kind of like moral hints of like just how to be a good human to one another, I guess, because I feel like that goes back to like environment. Like, because I did come from a military family, it was kind of just like morals of how to be a good person, not just to someone who's black, to someone who's white, to someone who's Asian, like just being a good person to another human.
My mom was very much like that as well, in terms of just like as a human, as a person. But I do remember very, very, very vividly like the Trayvon Martin hearing and the case and everything that went through with that. I remember being on vacation literally in Florida, and that was like an indirect, that was one of those things where you're kind of thrown in the pool as like a parent, right? Because you know, at the time, probably 11, what's this going on? Yeah, what's going on with this? And what's this? Like, what's, so that was my first moment of like, why is this happening? And what's wrong with this? And X, Y, Z. It was weird, right? It was very weird. And then that, you didn't have the conversations, you know, don't do this, don't do this, that. Because, you know, your mom would always, don't wear your bonnet outside, don't wear your do-rag here, don't do it. But you never know why. You just listen to your mom, right? And then you see something like that and feel like, whoa, is that something that could happen with me? And then, as I mentioned with you, having my brother, he's actually kind of been thrown in the fire himself at such a young age. Going to a predominantly white school, he's just told me so many things where it's like, I'm 21 and I'm like, wow. Like this 15-year-old, 14-year-old kid is asking me for advice about things. And I'm like, I don't know what to say because I've never had to deal with some of the things he's dealt with so aggressively.
Yeah, I think I was very, very fortunate. I thank God for my parents because they started the talk sort of in reverse. They started it with just a very strong affirmation of what my identity was, right? So I grew up in a Christian home. I'm a Christian myself. And so they would affirm constantly, black boy, you were made in the image of God. Like he made you fearfully, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made, that you are smart, you are this, you are that. So when somebody treats you improperly, it's a deviation from how you're supposed to be treated, right? It's not an assault on your value ever, right? We've taught you over and over, you come from strong people. You were made in the image of God. You're made in the image of your creator. You were made for good. You were made for this. You're smart. You're this. You're that. Your skin is beautiful. Look at the beautiful people you come from. Look at the strong heritage that you have of all these people who came and overcame all these different things. So I didn't realize the value of that until I got into the world, and it didn't really shake me per se.
Yeah.
So then when they have the talk, it's, though this is true, the world is broken and there are broken people, and it will treat you in a way that is not consistent with the truth of who you are. And I've tried to pass that on to my kids, because I have 4. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. The youngest is going to be 1 next week, so we haven't had to talk yet. Right? But the little girls and the little boy, my oldest is 12, and it's been because he was really young, but he's very aware, and they ask a lot of questions. But it started with, again, this is your identity. You are made in the image of God. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're beautiful. You are handsome. You are smart. You need to be kind because you're made in the image of this God that is good and kind and all these other things. Like, let's center you there. And then when the suitcases get heavier, then I go, yes, but this is the reason why mommy and daddy are nervous when you put your hood on, right? Because there are people out there who would treat you contrary to what the truth is about your worth and about the value of your life, right? And so, I'm thankful for my parents setting that example, because even when they talked about the stories of hardship, and they always talked about it in terms of stories of victory, stories of people who did X despite this, people who were challenged in so many different ways. But look at the resiliency that your grandfather showed. Look at the resiliency of these other people. It takes a lot of strength, right, to overcome a lot of those things and to continue to love. Like, I think about my grandfather. My grandfather grew up in Georgia and fought in 2 wars and raised 13 kids and was married to 1 woman until she died, right? And he went through unimaginable things, but he was one of the sweetest and kindest people. And to go through those things and yet still love is the height of strength, right? And resiliency is to take something that is very ugly and turn it and not allow it to change your identity, but continue to project and to support love around the people who are around you. That's really been my experience as I go back and I think through it. as a young man, but also the one I'm aspiring to have with all of my kids as well, is to is to frame the conversation that way, so that it isn't so much of my natural, like you talked about, the fear. Mm-hmm. It's more optimistic, hopeful.
I appreciate and love, and I just learned a lot about what you shared and how your family raised you and how they affirmed you and how they created this level of strength in you, and I appreciate that. I think my family, my mom and my dad took a different approach. My dad was hard on me. He was really hard. He knew what it was like to be out, and so he was really hard. It was I had a yes sir, no sir type of relationship with him. And there were times I really just didn't like my dad growing up because he was so hard on me. When I went away to college, I started to understand and respect what he was doing, because how I could navigate things. I saw myself. I knew how to pivot. I knew how to treat people. I knew how to behave in certain situations. And so what I ended up doing was taking a lot of what my dad taught me and how he taught me and try doing that with my boys. And it was challenging at times, because and it took me a while to realize is I was raising them based on something that I didn't like myself. So I was treating them, or at least my oldest son, in a way because I was trying to prepare him. And so I was really taking what I was taught and duplicating it. And I think what we're finding in a lot of these situations, a lot of things we're taught, we're replicating out. And so I think it's important for me that I've been able to adjust and realize that wasn't being helpful for my son. Because I had to take some reflection, realize that, yeah, I appreciate it later, but I didn't like it then. And so I took a whole different approach with him, to where I started telling him how much I loved him, and also showing him, not just telling him, but showing him. But I found myself with my youngest son, because my youngest son was there on Monday, and they showed Trayvon Martin with his hoodie. And my son was there with an Adidas hoodie, and he had his hoodie on. And I made him take his hood off, y'all. He should be able to wear his hood. You know, he should be able to wear his hood. And so I want us to continue to have these conversations, because we work and live in a department that's so eclectic, so diverse, right? And I believe that we always talk about wanting people to be the best versions of themselves. Well, I tell you, when I'm comfortable and I feel good in my own skin, I perform really well. I don't know about y'all, but I tend to believe that when we continue to create the type of environment where people can be their true selves, that performance is going to do like this. We're going to thrive. Y'all are our next leaders. Y'all make sure y'all tell the people that y'all around, these young kids that look up to y'all share these things with them. Y'all encourage them. And then when you have kids, if Lord gives you the ability to have kids, make sure y'all are teaching them the same thing. You pour into them, and you affirm them in who they are. Last takeaways. Anything from the talk, from the roundtable discussion, anything that's on your mind that you want to share. That's what this last segment is.
The work's not done, and it's, as you said, it's never done. As we are next leaders and as we become older, it's important to love and care for other people, to have perspective for other people, to listen to other people, and to, as you said, pour into other people. And there will be times where you will be challenged, and you will have to have a stern self and understand there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of hate, unfortunately, and that sometimes you can't combat that. But be true to yourself, and if that is what you believe, is that what you want, whatever you want to get out of other people, always look for it in others, right? We can control our destiny through our actions every day, through our mindset. and things won't always go how you want it to be. But if you push on and continue with what you believe, I think your words, your actions can be extremely powerful.
Yeah. Thank you, Kendall.
I think it's very much the point of the talk. It's an opening of discussion and making sure that the discussion continues, not just among like people who have experienced it, but everybody. Like, it's definitely a learning experience that everyone should take the time. I don't know if everyone will, but everyone should take the time to understand like history of what people have gone through, and then present day, what is your neighbor going through that you have no idea about. So I think it's about just learning more.
I think the whole point of the talk was to give us the key to the door to have these conversations.
Yeah.
And I think he did that really well. Now it's just all about if we're going to do that or not. And I guess that's the biggest thing about it. If we're going to have those conversations with the people that we love or not, just so we can start knowing one another more and at a deeper level, personal level, and start having our walk towards better days.
Last thing to close it out, you said something about we have a choice in how we show up. You didn't say it, but that's what I got.
Yeah.
Is we have a choice in how we show up, and who are we going to be for people? And I think part of it, the challenge that I always look at and how I challenge myself is, I realize that I can't change people. And so I challenge myself every day to walk in light and in love. And I try to share that as much as I can, because I can't beat hate with hate. I got to beat hate with love, and I got to bring in light to eradicate darkness. And it's not easy. And I think we need to continue to show the right examples. And I think that's going to draw people. And we've got to be willing to have conversations. I think that's the key to all of it, is we've got to continue to talk. And we've got to give people the space who may not know and not beat them up when they say something wrong. We have to be willing to share, to educate in a way that gives empathy, that shows empathy. I think that's part of it. I think we've got to create a space where people can learn. Because if I'm bringing something to you and you say something wrong and I'm now beating you upside the head because you said something wrong, you're not going to want to talk to me very much anymore. And so we need to, I'm not telling y'all what to do, but I'm choosing to walk in love and light and create the right spaces for people to make mistakes and show them grace. That's where I am. So thank y'all for coming. Thank y'all for being part of the round table discussion.